my name is Missie Carpenter and my company is Traditional Primitives. Today I'd like to tell you a little bit about my starch basting technique for basting English paper piecing as well as applique shapes. The freezer paper I use is very different than others. It's called premium freezer paper, and it really is great quality because it does not shrink or distort like other brands of freezer paper. We're going to be able to use this one little hexie about 20 times before we need to worry about replacing it. That really makes all of the shapes fit together perfectly. All those seams are going to be the same length, so you have precise piecing. We're using 2 pieces of paper put together so that we are having this stiff enough that I can feel it with the iron. We sell it as an individual sheet so that you can put it through your copy machine and copy or print your shapes off if you wish, and then cut them out by hand. Otherwise, you can just double them up using your iron or a laminator if you happen to have one, and get them stiff and put together, and then punch them out or use your die cutting machines that are available now for cutting these shapes out. We've got 2 layers here. We're going to put this right down onto the wrong side of the fabric. And then we're going to use this iron and press that shiny side. We have 2 shiny sides facing downward. We're just going to press that shiny side to the wrong side of the fabric, and that makes that freezer paper stick to that fabric. Now this process right here solves all my problems for what I had with basting English paper piecing the traditional way using needle and thread. I would fold that seam allowance over, and it would shift that paper with each fold, and then I didn't have any seam allowance left over. This is stuck in place. It's going to hold in place for you to go ahead and feel with this iron. It's not going to move. We're going to have great shapes. So I've just put my fingertip stiletto on. This is going to be what I'm using to hold on to this hot paper. As I use that iron, that paper gets very hot. I can get right up there next to it without burning my finger. It is adjustable for different size knuckles and fingertips. Just open up gently or close gently to make it fit properly. And if you notice, it is bent just like my fingertip. So it's real natural and easy to learn to use. You won't be struggling too much. Maybe 3 or 4 hexie shapes, you'll have it down pat on how to use this tool. And then we have the starch brush. I've used the premium quilting starch. Has a point on the end, and we just squirt it right into the handle of the brush, and we're ready to go. I'm going to squeeze gently, and that starch starts to come out. Sometimes when you haven't used it for a while, you'll need to let it wake up and give it time to drip down to the bristles of the brush. Then once it's awake, it goes very quick. Generally, I'll do this assembly line style with it's anywhere from 8 to 12, depending on the humidity level. If it is winter time, my heating system in my home is gas heat, and it dries quicker, so I can only do about 8 shapes at a time. If it's summertime, it's more humid, and I can do up to 12 shapes at a time. So that makes it all go quicker. So you just paint them all, then you would iron them all, then you would remove the papers from all of them. Now I'm going to use this iron to set the shape. And the first seam, if you can see how I'm rubbing up against the edge and listen carefully, perhaps you can hear that bumping. That lets me know that I am actually folding it right at the edge of the paper, not outside the paper, and I'm not folding the paper. So I can feel that edge. That's why the 2 layers of this specific paper are important. It's the perfect recipe for feeling and folding over easily. So we're just folding that first seam allowance over, and I'm not going to let that iron dry either seam allowance here. I want it to stay right on the paper. That's going to allow the next seam to remain damp and flexible and very easy to fold over. Out here, this is still wet, so we're just going to fold it over again. You can see that I'm using this fingertip stiletto to hold on to this previous seam. Keeps it right there and does not let the iron shift it outward. I'm also using it to turn this hot fabric and paper so that I don't burn my skin any longer. Now when we come around to this last one, dragging that in, making sure that fabric stays right up next to the paper shape, and we end up with these perfect shapes every time. We'll set that aside and let it cool, and I'll talk to you a bit about what we're going to do next. Once I take this out, I do need to let it cool first, because if we take it out when it's warm, it lifts up and then you don't have a nice crisp flat shape. So we're just going to let that cool while I talk a bit here. This is what I'm actually handling and holding on to as I'm sewing. I've got another piece here ready to go. We'd put right sides together and You can very comfortably wrinkle this up any way you want to get to where you're sewing. It's very comfortable. We're not fighting with that bulky edge of paper that's usually left in all along this outer edge. It's no longer awkward to get that next piece in and sewn in place. And if you look carefully, these seams here, these stitches, everything is very flat, and that's because everything is made in a precise shape up against this paper. And if you look closely, there are hardly any stitches being able to be seen. That's because we're using 60 weight polyester thread. I like the Bottom Line brand. You can also use higher weight thread. So I say 60 weight or above will give you exquisite stitches. All right, this is cooled off now, so we're just going to push this away at one of the corners and pop it right out. Those seam allowances go right back into place, and we have this perfect shape as if that paper were still there, but again, we no longer need that paper in there while we're sewing it. So it's very comfortable. And that's what we do for basting English paper piecing using premium freezer paper and premium starch from Traditional Primitives.